What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Stefan here from App Stuff, and this is the ultimate SwiftUI Bootcamp. In our last video, we went over how to build this absolutely amazing Uber Eats menu using a scroll view. In this video, we're going to be working with grids, and we're going to be building this beautiful Instagram profile that we see here and displaying the user's posts in a grid format using the SwiftUI grid feature. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. We're going to start off by just doing a basic grid tutorial, and then we're going to go over how to make it all nice and pretty and display some cool images and build this Instagram profile. So I'm going to put that away for a bit. I'm going to go create a new file here, and it's going to be called grids tutorial. SwiftUI view, grids tutorial. All right, guys, so just make sure you have your preview connected, and let's go ahead and get started with this grids tutorial. So I'm gonna start off by just creating a bunch of rectangles in a vertical stack, and then we're gonna go over how to put those into a grid. So I'm gonna put this in a scroll view to start, and then I'm gonna say VStack, and I'm gonna say for each, and select data and content. We're gonna say 0 up to 50. And then on our content, just say index in, and we're going to put ID \self here. And that's our for each loop. Now I'm just gonna say rectangle.frame and just give it a height of 50. Okay, so we notice that it's a bunch of rectangles filling out the width of the screen, and they all have a height of 50. So if we wanted to, we could also give it a width, width of 50 as well. And this is going to be just a standard, list of rectangles. So how do we put this into a grid? So what we can do is replace VStack with something called a lazy V grid. And this is actually going to ask us to provide it with some data so it can figure out how to build itself, or how to build. So you'll notice we need to provide it with some columns. So let's actually just go ahead and delete this content guy real quick, and let's talk about what these columns are. So basically the vgrid needs to know how many columns you want it to have so that it can create itself properly. So we define the amount of columns we want the grid to have. So let's go ahead up to the top of our file and do that now. We're going to say let columns equal, and then you can just open up a set of square brackets. So this is going to be an array once again, and we're going to create this array of something called a grid item. So I'm going to say grid item, and then you guys could go ahead and open up parentheses and say dot fixed, and then just pass it a number, say like 50. And go ahead and create another grid item, open parentheses, dot fixed of 50. And then let's go ahead and take this columns property and pass it in to our lazy V grid. So now it's going to say, hey, I'm going to create a grid for you that's going to have 2 columns because this array has 2 items, and they're going to have a fixed size of 50. So let's go ahead and hit resume. And you guys will notice that once our preview gets back up and running, let me hit try again, that it's going to give us back a grid with 2 rectangles per row. And I could literally just keep adding grid items here. Oops, dot fixed, and let me see if I can add one of like 100, and let's see how that looks. So you guys notice that there's some spacing. If you delete the width parameter in your frame, you're going to notice that this changes a little bit, right? So this is pretty cool, and maybe you could make this one like 72 or something, so you guys could see how this is going to affect the size of each grid item and how these grid items in this array sort of works, right? So that's a fixed size for each individual item. You guys could imagine that if we tried to adapt this to different screen sizes, using a fixed grid item size could get kind of dangerous, right? Because we couldn't guarantee that all the grid items would fit on every single screen size we're working with. We could have an iPad or an iPhone or maybe an iPhone SE. Just different screen sizes are going to make using fixed grid item sizes more dangerous and not as adaptive. So luckily for us, SwiftUI gives us the ability to create something called flexible grid items. So I could go here and say .flexible and just Open and close your parentheses just like that. And let's hit try again and see how this affects our grid. Oops, I need another parenthesis right there. And I'm gonna put these all on individual lines, guys, so it's a little bit easier to understand. So look at that, right? That's pretty cool. So what a flexible grid item does is it stretches to fill as much of the screen as it can. So for example, guys, if I just made my grid have one flexible item, just like that, and hit resume, it's just gonna be one rectangle that fills the entire width of the screen, just like that. And it has a height of 50. So let's see what happens if I copy this grid item. So let's copy that, put a comma, enter, and put another flexible grid item. You're gonna notice that it fills the entire width of my screen with 2 rectangles now. And I could just keep pasting this guy in there, and it's going to adapt the size of my grid to fit the specifications that I have provided. So right now, because there's 3 items in my grid item array, it is creating 3 columns, and each one of those is a flexible grid item. So what that's doing is it's saying, hey, fit the screen width no matter what size it is, and just see how many things we can fit within that individual screen size. So we could literally just keep going, right? Let's do like 6 items across, and it's gonna adjust the size of each one of our rectangles to fit the frame of the screen. So that's an absolutely incredible feature there, guys. And it has a ton of customization available to it. So you could mix and match sort of flexible grid items and fixed grid items. It just depends on what you need for your application. And you guys will notice that this is pretty cool because it's all wrapped inside of a scroll view. So if I created like, 100 of these, it'll just expand my list to have 100 grid items now in this awesome sort of like grid format, right? So that's really, really cool. And that's just a quick tutorial on the basics of how to work with a grid, guys. Now what I want us to do is actually start having some fun and see if we can build out this Instagram profile. So the grid part isn't going to be too bad. It's pretty similar to what we just did there. The fun stuff is going to be creating this profile header. And once again, that's going to combine a bunch of the skills we've learned up to this point in the bootcamp, just to make sure that you guys get those reps in and that you don't forget what you've learned. It's always good to sort of bring everything back around, bring it full circle, and see if we can build out these really fun user interfaces that we would see in Instagram. So let's go ahead and actually create another file for this. I want you guys to have this just as reference. And we're going to go up to the top, create a new file, SwiftUI view. It's going to say Instagram profile tutorial. And because these are both part of sort of the same chapter, I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the top and right click and create a new group. And this allows me to create a folder, and I'm going to call it grids. I'm going to take these 2 files. So just hold down the shift button, guys, and you can click on both of them. And then you can just drag them up into your grids folder. So now we know that everything associated with grids is going to be put into this grids folder. So now let's go ahead and start having some fun and build out this Instagram profile. All right, guys. So once again, just get your preview connected and let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we notice about this is that everything is scrollable. So we're going to go ahead and just put this thing in a scroll view to start. So I'm going to highlight that, remove it, and add a scroll view. And that looks good so far. And this is overall going to be a VStack, guys. And that's typically what you're going to see with any screen because everything is obviously stacked on top of each other. And we're going to start off by creating this navigation bar up at the top. So let me adjust this a little bit more so we can see that. Okay, so it's going to be an H stack, and we're going to start off with this image, system name, chevron.left. We're going to give it a font of .title2, and that should be good. And then we need to create this Black Panther guy along with this check mark for saying that he's verified. And we're going to say text, and then that's going to be Black Panther. And then we are going to say .font, .subheadline, .font weight, .semi-bold. And then we're going to create another image, system name, this is going to be checkmark.seal.fill, guys. So that looks pretty good right there. And then we're going to give it a foreground color of .blue. So that looks good. And then we are going to give that a font of .caption to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so now how do we space these things out correctly? So what we're going to do is add a spacer here after the image, and that's going to get that guy where we want it. But now we need to get Black Panther back over to the center of the screen. So after the text and the image, go ahead and add another spacer, guys. And you guys are going to notice that that gets that exactly where we want it. So that's looking really good. Really quickly, guys, the way these spacers work together are that we have one spacer pushing this to the absolute maximum that it can push it, to the right. And before we added this spacer, it was just all the way to the edge of the frame. But then we add a spacer right here that pushes it back over. But because we have those two spacers working together, they just meet in the middle like that. So that's a really nice trick that we see there. And let's go ahead and just give this some padding. So on the HStack, add padding. And I'm going to add some comments here, guys, just so we know what is what. So that's our nav bar. And that looks really good. Now what I want us to do is create this stuff here. So let's first talk about how we are going to create this stuff and like sort of lay it out, right? Because there's a lot of stuff going on. So what I chose to do here, and there's a couple different ways of doing it, don't get me wrong, is I put all of this stuff in an HStack. So the image and then all of these like stats here. And each one of these stats is its own VStack, right? So this sort of guy is all one HStack, and then we continue on with the VStack as we go down. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna add a comment here that says profile image plus stats, and this is gonna be an HStack. And we're gonna start by creating this image. So I'm gonna say image, and you guys use whatever images you want. I literally just went to Google and downloaded a bunch of images of Black Panther. You could do the same, and then just drag them into your assets folder that we see here. So I'm going to say Black Panther -1, and this is obviously going to be stupidly massive. We need to resize it. So I'm going to say .resizable. Then I'm going to say .scaled to fill. Then I'm going to say .frame. And the width and height, guys, it's going to be, I think 72 by 72. And then we're going to give it a clip shape of a circle. And actually, let's make that like 84 by 84. You see this image right here is pretty big. Actually, my bad, 88 by 88. That's what I have in my code, 88 by 88. Okay, so once again, guys, we want this aligned to the left side of our screen. So on this HStack here, what I'm gonna do is add a spacer. And now what we're gonna do is create each one of these little stat views. So each one of those is going to be a VStack. So I'm gonna go here and say VStack, VStack, VStack. Well, actually, let's just create one and then we can copy and paste it. So we have a VStack, and it's going to be a text of 3,226, just like that. And then we're going to give that a font of .subheadline, .font weight is .semi-bold. So that looks good. And then below that, guys, we are going to place text and say posts. And then this is going to be a font of .caption, and that looks pretty good. And so what we can do now is go up to the top here, and I want to add some spacing. So just give it a spacing of like 2, and that's going to just stretch it out just a tad bit to get it looking pretty good. And then we can just copy and paste this guy 2 times. And that is what we have right now. And then here we can just add some different data. We can say 393M, and then say followers. And then here we can say 493 following. All right, so that looks pretty good. We just need to space it out a little bit, right? So here's what we're going to do that. We are actually going to place all of these VStack items inside of its own HStack, right? So let's cut that all out, say HStack, and paste it all back in. And you guys will notice it looks exactly the same. But now what we can do is apply our own individual spacing to each one of these items. So I could say spacing here is 32. And you guys will notice that it spaces those out nice and neat. So if you guys were to sort of back that out, just keep hitting Command Z. And let's say we went up to the top and put the spacing on this whole HStack right here, it would make everything all messed up. And that's because it's applying spacing for everything in the HStack, right? Including this image. So we kind of want to just treat this as its own individual HStack that's within this sort of bigger HStack. So I'm going to just back that out. And let's go ahead and rewrap this inside of an HStack and paste that stuff in there and say spacing is 32. Right, so that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and continue on with these two components here. So let's go ahead and below this HStack, and let's see, let me comment this and say stats. And just to make this a little bit more readable, guys, go to the bottom of this HStack here and you can command click on that last bracket and you can say fold, and it will fold all of that stuff up for you, which is pretty neat, right? So we can apply that here as well. So that's our nav bar. This is our profile image and stats. We can actually bring that back out, and let's just do it on this super big HStack. So just say fold. So now we sort of have our stuff like neatened, a lot neater, right? So we can actually read what's going on in our code. So now we know that we are still within this VStack here, and I'm gonna go ahead and create some text, and it's gonna say Chadwick Bozeman. And you guys notice that it shows up right there. We do want it to the edge of the screen. We'll go over how to do that in a second. Let's just give this a dot font of dot footnote, dot font weight, dot semi bold. So that looks pretty good. And then we are going to create another text, and it's going to say www.blackpanther.com. And something cool about SwiftUI, guys, is it automatically recognizes that this is a link. So it will automatically allow me to click on that, and it will take me over to a link, which is pretty cool. So now let's go ahead and give this a font of dot caption, and because it'll make it nice and small. And now what we need to do, guys, is get this aligned to the left side of the screen. So on our VStack here, this is one option. You could say alignment is dot leading, right? And that's one option, but I particularly don't like this because that will then by default make everything we put in this VStack have a leading alignment. So for example, when we get down to these buttons, we want that to be centered in the stack. We don't want it to be aligned to the left. So what we can do to solve that, right? We could wrap it in another VStack, but that's going to make things a little bit messier. So what we can do is wrap this text in its own VStack. So just go ahead and cut that out. And what we're going to do is say dot frame and then say max width dot infinity and then say alignment is dot leading. So you guys will notice that that shoves that over to the leading edge of the frame. When you say dot infinity, it just makes it fill the entire width of the screen. So that's a pretty neat trick that we have right there. And we do notice that this VStack in itself is not aligned to the edge of the frame. So in order to get that to happen, we can just go here and say alignment is dot leading. And then we are going to say spacing is 2, just to space it out a tad bit. And that looks really good so far, guys. It's really coming together. And we do want a little bit more space on the top. So we could go ahead and say dot padding, dot vertical, and we could give it some vertical padding of like 4, right? So that'll give it some padding of 4 pixels on the top and the bottom. Now let's go ahead and create this super cool like followers view, right? So once again, I'm gonna wrap this guy up. Let's say fold. Actually, no, we could just leave that. Oh, what is happening? Dot padding, dot vertical. Sorry guys, I messed that up a little bit. Okay, so now this is like our user info. So let's keep going. This is going to be a common followers view. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and we're going to create an HStack to do this because it's this horizontally stacked thing of components. And we're going to create 3 images here, guys. So I'm going to say image, and I'm going to use just like Black Panther -2. And I'm going to say .resizable, .scale to fill, .frame with height and alignment, 32 by 32. We don't need the alignment. And then I'm going to say .clip shape is a circle. So that looks pretty good. Now, because this is inside of an HStack, I can just apply the spacer and it's going to push it all the way to the left of my screen for me. So that looks great. Now, I want 2 more images and I sort of want them to overlap with each other. And you guys will notice that if you look really closely, that each one of the images has a border. So it like creates some separation. So we're going to go over how to do that. First thing, let's copy that and paste it 2 more times. So you guys are going to notice that each thing is spaced out, pretty nicely, but we want them to overlap. So we can actually apply a negative spacing value. So on your HStack, go ahead and give it a spacing of -12, and it's going to overlap our images for us. And this is where this border is going to come into play, guys. You'll notice that like the images are very unclear, like where they're overlapping because there's no border. So if I go and place an overlay on this guy, an overlay is literally just something that overlays on top of your image. And then you go here and say circle dot I always spell circle wrong, man. It's like one of my biggest flaws as a person. All right, now you say dot stroke, and then you can say color dot white. Line width is going to be 2. And let's see what that does. Right, so that guy is like sort of at the back, so you can't really see it. But if I apply this to the next one, so copy that overlay and apply it to the next image, you guys will see that it gets that like really nice white border and creates this like really cool separation effect. So now I place that there, and once again, that border shows up, and that's looking really, really good, guys. Now we just have to get this big old like following text, right? So this is actually going to be pretty fun to do. So let's go ahead and after this image, let me zoom back out on the preview because that is way too big. We're going to create an HStack, and it's kind of tricky to get text bolded, right? So I'm going to make each one of these components like an individual guy in the HStack. So followed by, it's going to be its own thing. Spider-Man, Iron Man are going to be its own thing, and is going to be its own thing, and then 146 others, it's going to be its own thing. And we're going to be able to pick which ones we want to bold. So guys, these are absolutely invaluable SwiftUI tricks that you're learning here that really help bring your user interface together. And like these little things make the world of difference when you're building a user interface and you want it to be like really, really beautiful. So let's go ahead and just say text followed by, and then we'll add another text, and we can just say like Spider-Man, comma, Iron Man, and then we'll say dot font weight dot semi bold, and then we'll go and say text and text 146 others dot font weight dot semi bold. So this is all messed up right now because we need to make it smaller. So I'm going to say dot font is dot caption, and that is still a little bit messed up, and that's okay. I'm going to give it some padding of dot leading as well, and then I'm going to give the HStack a spacing parameter of 2. Just to make everything sort of shrink up a little bit. And it's still not perfect, and that's okay, guys. We're gonna go ahead and figure out how to get this to make it sort of like fit all on one line. So first off, let's go up to the top and change the spacing from -12 to -10. And that's just going to space the images out a little bit more. And the reason that this is sort of getting scrunched up, guys, is because we have this overall padding on this entire header. So like if I go down to this padding guy and replace it to like 8, or just really just make the padding smaller, it'll help me fit my text onto that line. You could even do like 6 or something like that. And that's going to solve that problem there. So that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and actually fold all of this stuff up, guys, because that's a pretty big sub view. So I'm going to go here and say fold. And this is our common followers view. This is our user info, profile image and stats, and our nav bar. So this is all looking really good. Now let's go ahead and create these buttons right here. That's going to be pretty easy to do. So I'm going to just go ahead and create yet another HStack. And I'm going to create this text that says following, another text that says messages, or message it should be. And then this image, let me scroll down for you guys so you can see this image. And it's going to be a system name of person.badge.plus. And let's see how this is looking. So that should still be within our VStack, right? Our preview's loading. It is being mean to me and it doesn't want to work. Sometimes you just have to keep hitting try again on your preview, guys, in order for it to start working. So it's finally cooperating with me. Now we have this following message and this little profile image guy. Now we just need to sort of adjust the size and give them some overlays and stuff like that to make this look nice and neat. So we're going to say .font is .footnote on each one. So footnote. And then we're going to give it a font weight of .semibold. We are going to give this a frame of width 152, height of 34. Sorry, 34. And then we're going to give it an overlay, guys. Oops. Dot overlay. And this is where we're going to apply this rounded rectangle. And we're going to give it a corner radius of 4. And then we're going to say dot stroke of color, and then open up your parentheses, and you're going to say dot system gray 5. So this system gray is like a bunch of different shades of gray that we get from Xcode, which is really, really cool. And you guys can see now that that has that really nice sort of light gray color. I think we could actually say system gray 4 and just change it up a little bit. And now you'll see that really nice gray color showing up. And we're just literally going to copy this, guys, and paste it underneath message. And it's going to give it that same effect. And then for this little guy here, we pretty much do the same thing. So I'm just going to give it a font of .footnote. I'm going to give it a frame, but it's obviously going to be smaller. It's going to be 32 by 34. And then we're going to give that this overlay as well. So overlays are something that we haven't seen at this point in the course, but this is a pretty good example of how it works. It's just giving this text this overlay, right? So the text has a frame. It's 152 wide and 34 pixels tall. And then on the edges of that frame, we apply this overlay, and it's a rounded rectangle that has that stroke color of system gray 4. So that looks really good, guys. Next up, we have this row of buttons. So really quickly, let me just command click on that. We're going to hit fold, and we'll call these action buttons. And then let's go below that list of action buttons, and we're going to create this, and we're going to call this like media type, I guess you could say. Right, because this would potentially be like grids, reels, videos, and tagged posts or whatever. We're obviously not going to be working with that. It's just images we're going to get showing up on the screen here. So I'm going to create an HStack for that. And we're just going to create 4 images. First one is image system name of square shape dot split. dot 3 by 3. And I think I've mentioned this before, guys. These images are all coming from this SF Symbols app, so I recommend downloading that to get that list of icons. We went over that in our icons tutorial. So I'm going to say dot font is dot title 2. Then I'm going to add another image, system name, play dot rectangle dot font dot title 2. And then we're just going to copy and paste this 2 more times, and we're just going to change the image name, guys. Okay, so now let's change this guy to, I think it's just play, and then this guy is going to be person.crop.square. So that looks really good. Now we got to figure out how to space this stuff out. Okay, so we're going to use spacers to do that. So this is going to be really cool, guys. I'm going to add a spacer after the grid image, and that's going to fill out all the space between this image and the rest of these guys. Now what you're going to see is I'm going to apply a spacer after this play button, and it's going to move it over to the left of my screen. Right, it's going to fill back all this empty space, but maintain the original spacer that I applied right here. And then I'm going to do the same thing after this play button, and it's going to stretch that out a little more. And then I'm going to do the same thing after this guy right here. So I'm going to add another spacer, and that's going to shove that over. And now you guys notice that all this is sort of shoved to the left, and it has nice even spacing between each one. If I want to get this centered in the screen, right, and sort of fill out the rest of this empty space, I'm going to apply a spacer right before my first image, and that's going to make everything look really good there. So that looks great, guys. Now what we're going to do is apply some padding to this. So first off, I'm going to go here at the end of this HStack and say dot padding, and we're going to say dot horizontal is 32. Oh no, sorry, we don't need that. My bad. We want a vertical padding. Padding.vertical, and it's going to be like 6. So that's just going to give some space on the top and bottom there, and that looks really good. We're also going to change the foreground color of this. So I'm going to go here and say dot foreground color, open up your parentheses and say dot dark gray. So that's going to give it this nice like dark gray color, and that looks absolutely amazing. Now, guys, that we've done all of that really fun stuff, it's now finally time for the grid. So let's go ahead and fold this guy up really quickly. So I'm just going to say fold, and that looks good. Now we're going to create our grid of posts, right? This is what we all came here for. So we're going to say lazy v grid, and we need to create some columns, okay? So let's just forget about that for now. Hit enter on that content guy, and this is where we're going to create our content. So let's see if we can do this. We're going to go up to the top of our file, and we're going to create that columns array. And we obviously want 3 columns, right? That's how many columns we have. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to say grid item dot open your parentheses, say dot flexible, and delete the minimum and maximum, guys. We don't need those. And then we are going to go at the end of that and just copy this 2 more times. So I'm going to go here, say that, and that. And let's hit enter after that. So we have each one on a new line. So this is saying we're creating 3 flexible grid items. We go ahead and pass that in to this guy here. And now within this, I'm going to create a for each loop. And let's loop on this guy right here, 0 up to, and let's just say like 15 or something, or less than 15. And for our content, we're going to say index in, and here we're going to say ID \self. So this is combining so many different things, right, guys? And it's really bringing everything we've done this far into up to this point in the course together in a really nice way with a really cool feature. So index in. Now what we're going to do is create this image here. So I'm just going to say image, and I'm just going to say Black Panther -1, and or we could say -2, doesn't matter. dot resizable dot scale to fill dot frame, and we just need to give it a frame here. And this is actually let's not give it a frame. We're gonna leave the frame out for now and see how it looks. We're gonna give it a border of color dot white, and then we're gonna say dot clipped. So let's go ahead and hit resume and see how that looks. Moment of truth. Oh my goodness, my preview doesn't want to work. There we go. Okay, so it looks really close to what we want, right? So we have this like image, and these are like the original dimensions of the image, right? I think if I were to change this to Black Panther 1, it would change. Yeah, see how it changes to sort of adjust the original size of the image. It adjusts the sort of how the grid looks. We can go ahead and make it so that it forces the images to fill this frame right here. So I want us to go back up to the top, guys, and we're going to create this property here. We're going to say let image dimension, and it's going to be UI screen dot main dot bounds dot width divided by 3. So this is like an image dimension, and we're saying that we want it to be 1/3 of the screen size. So this is just how you get the screen size in SwiftUI. You say UI screen dot main dot bounds dot width, and it gives you the size of whatever screen you're working on, and then you divide it by 3. So now we can just go ahead and give this guy a dot frame, and all we need to do is give it a height of dimension or image dimension, just like that. Go ahead and hit resume, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so looking a little bit weird, right? Not exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and force the width to be that image dimension as well. And you guys are going to notice that that looks really, really good, but not exactly where we want it to be, right? The grid still has this spacing between its items. So we can add a spacing parameter to our lazy V grid and say 0, and it's going to force everything to sort of scrunch up and give us exactly what we want for this sort of Instagram grid layout. And that looks really good. So this border is a nice little trick, guys. So if I were to comment this out, it's going to look like there's no spacing between the images, right? So instead of working with trying to space these things out pixel by pixel, you can literally just apply that border. So it's going to give each image a white border to make it look like there's spacing between them, but there's actually not. It's just a border. That's a nice little SwiftUI trick there. And that's gonna look absolutely incredible, guys. Now, obviously this is working with a bunch of different images. We're not gonna go over how to do that in this video because this one has gone on long enough. Really quickly, guys, just go ahead and hit play, and you guys will notice that you'll be able to scroll through your images like this. In another video, guys, we're going to go over how you could, drop different images into a grid like this. And that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this one. That was a bit of a doozy, but it was a lot of fun. And like I said before, it really brought together all the skills we've learned thus far in this boot camp to help us create this absolutely beautiful user interface of this Instagram profile that we see here. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Stefan here from App Stuff saying peace out.